Okay, so to rehash a bit for the video, we've been talking about design of workflows in the context of Complice. I've just been adding a new thing to the Complice new tab page that lets you enter a new intention from the new tab page. And we're kind of talking about whether that should work more like the today page or more like the now page. And basically with the today page, there's an assumption when you finish your current thing, and you hit done, then whatever is next on your list is what you're now working on. With the now page in Complice, there's an assumption that it sort of aggressively doesn't assume that it knows what you're working on. So when you complete something, it's like, what now? And like, if you have your list for today, you can still grab it, but it doesn't automatically advance to the next one. And so then you were saying you and Nebraska were talking about a third possibility, which is basically, the way I understand it is like it prompts you with what the next thing is on the list, but then there's still like one further button that's like actually choosing to work on it right now. Yeah. So this is kind of a third workflow. And I was just saying, like, I wasn't opinionated about the first two. Like, I think both of them are good, and that's why Complice has them as the two pages. And now I'm like, oh shit, there's a third possibility here. And I'm even wondering if page is the right way to think about this. Like, it's not, I don't feel like there should be a third page that has this mode. I'm like, that's a little bit,
that's a lot.
That's like the wrong level of abstraction. But I do like the idea of the user being able to sort of flow between these different modes. One where it's just like, bam, 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 I'm just gonna do the next thing. And maybe the next thing pops up and it's like, you know, take a nap, and you're like, nah, it's not nap time yet, so you defer it till later. But like, yeah. So I love the concept of all three of these modes. Yeah, so anyway, is there more you want to say about what design you and Nebraska are thinking of? Like,
so I think on this question, there's another factor here that's top of mind, which is reducing the amount of ways that you can look at the same thing. And so, you know, if you've got the cube with a red side, blue side, and a white side, and they're all substantially different to look at, then by all means, like, have the different views and provide a means to rotate the cube. If you are going through your to-dos and it's a question of like, do we default to the next to-do, or do we ask the user for input on that? That feels like it's the same kind of action. Like, it's the same, like, we're going through our to-dos and we're executing our day. And in that case, I wonder if there are any other like substantial differences that would drive this being kind of a page thing that you talked about. Of, should there be two pages, or I would almost default to like it should be one page, and then like pull it out as there's like substantial design implications.
Yeah. So I mean, part of the context here is that I was getting Brent and Nebraska to try to design an entirely new workflow for Complice, or I guess I wasn't even thinking about it so much as a new workflow, but a new interface, a new experience of using Complice that's sort of more minimalist, cleaner. And that's, I think, how the now page ended up being its own page, is that I wanted a page where I couldn't look at my list, right? It was nice. The whole point.
Nice.
A page where that just wasn't, like, where the list was not relevant unless I had decided that I wasn't doing a particular thing. It's sort of like, there's no way to view the whole list of things unless I'm choosing what to do and deciding if I want to do something from the list. But that's a different relationship to the list. There's no like the list is a drop down as opposed to just a active or a sort of like a passive display.
There's a lot of mental energy in having your to-do list staring at you.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I just decided maybe it was 2 years ago. At some point in the last few years, I decided to change the default view on the, well, so first of all, I made an option to have the default view of the Complice Today page be the next action tab that shows you just the top item, instead of having the default view be the list. And then around the same time, I think I was like, actually, I think that's just a better default. So it's like, now that there's a setting, I'm going to default everybody to that other thing. Like, that's a huge change, right? Because like the Today page is one of the most, like, it's sort of the center.
Core of the app.
It's the core of the app, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but I was changing it because I was like, yeah, I don't think most of the time you need to be looking at your list. I think most of the time you just need to be doing whatever you're doing, right? And so then the Now page takes that to an even further extreme, where it says there is no list to look at. There's just a list to choose from, and then you're just doing what you're doing. And so, yeah, so I'm curious, like, I mean, I love the idea of the hybrid thing, and maybe it is just insofar as you're designing a totally different page for Complice. Maybe that page just has this hybrid thing where it says, okay, here's the next thing, do this or pick something else, and it just gives you that binary choice, as opposed to either assuming you want to do that thing, or just going, you could do anything.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because those are the sort of, that's the today and the now. But this one is kind of like, here's the next default. But what I love is that, you know, like, Complice intentions are called intentions, not to-dos, because you are, when you set them, you are intending to do them.
Yes.
Like, so it puts it back into not like something imposed on you, but something that you're choosing.
Yeah.
And that's part of what the Now page is also really good for, is that it's inherently not stale, right? It's so fresh because it's like, here's what I chose to do. And so there's something really powerful about, it's like your mission, should you choose to accept it,
Yeah, is this intention?
is this intention.
Nice.
But
nice.
you actually get to accept it.
Yeah, that was actually Nebraska's whole thing with and why this design came up, or why this design choice happened, which she felt like users would not only be confused but just kind of feel imposed on if they entered all their to-dos and they weren't, not their to-dos, their intentions, excuse me.
Yeah.
And they weren't in priority order when they entered it. You're just entering it and whatever your brain is, and then whatever comes up first, and then you just start working. You don't do the reprioritization, the drag and drop to actually order these things. It's like, no, I don't want to work on that. I want to work on this other thing. But I think, yeah, she hinted at this, but you're really fleshing out this level where it's an opt-in thing, and like, yeah, I am gonna go for a quick walk, and then I'm gonna opt in, and now we're gonna start. This is my new intention.
Yeah, and the UI that you made is actually, I'm realizing, already in other ways too, a hybrid between these two views, because it features the current thing really, really boldly, more boldly than the list does, but less boldly than the than sort of the Now page or the Next Action tab does, and then you have a one-click, like, click on one of the intentions below to start it.
That's it.
And so that, like, that in and of itself matches this hybrid mode.
Oh,
you
you
see what I mean?
Yeah, that's funny.
Like the fact, like the fact that, like, there's, because like on the Today page, like on the Now page, you've got Now mode. There's nothing, and then you choose something. Could be from your list of stuff for today. Could be from your list of stuff you didn't do the last few days. Could be from your list of dailies or wherever else. From on the Today page, you just got your list, and all you can do is drag to reorder.
Interesting.
Now, technically, actually, if you're using keyboard shortcuts, which is most of how I use Complice, I almost never drag and drop anything. But if you're using keyboard shortcuts, technically there is a sort of a button that says, now I'm going to do this, and the button is Shift C. Like, it's like you just, when you have the thing highlighted, you hit Shift C and it moves it to the top. So functionally, that's like saying start, but it is still it's a reorder action.
Yeah, that's funny. We're gonna bump this up to the top priority, even though it wasn't the top priority.
Right, which functionally means I'm going to do this next, but it is still a different meaning. It's still a resorting. Like, sometimes I have like 3 things and I want to move them all up to the top, and so I suppose I just added them and they're at the bottom. I hit L to jump down to the bottom. I hit Shift C to move it to the top. I hit L to jump down to the bottom again. I hit Shift C to move. So it's like it is a reorganization hotkey fundamentally, not a select this to do right now hotkey.
Let's do it. Yeah.
It can play that role, but that's not fundamentally what it is. So what I'm seeing is that your start button, Like the way that like clicking on an intention that's not your current one moves it to start it
Yeah.
is like, that's already the hybrid.
This is like
your UI is already the hybrid, so of course it should work like that. Yeah. So we've actually come up with, in addition to the new visual style that you were working on, we've actually come up with a slightly new workflow that's between today and now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Insofar as you can map it onto that, like it's not intrinsic, it's not like perfectly between, but like it has elements of both. It's
and I'd love to continue to explore the design space. I think we've got some interesting things where we can really lean into pulling the best from the now page and the to-do page.
It's the today page,
The today page, excuse me, and just make it so it just has everything of the best of both, and then that's just the page.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, and I mean it does get me curious about, like, if we now separate out the visual design and the workflow design.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we could make a version of the now page that has your visual aesthetic.
Definitely.
Wouldn't be hard to do. Would be like a couple CSS moves. We could make a version of the today page that has your visual aesthetic. A bit harder to do. For a couple reasons, but just because there's more there, but not impossible. It's it's a different design language. Like, I am way too lazy to put overlays on the video. So for the video people, basically his design, I mean, you can pull it up on your screen and show it to them, but basically it's, instead of having the intentions in the goal color, it has them, it has like the goal color as a little icon next to the thing. So it's designed to just be less kind of in your face with the colors and so forth. There's a few other differences too, like just fewer visual elements overall. Anyway, and then we could also make a thing that has your hybrid workflow with the existing visual design. So the like full color intentions and the whatever else, Yeah.
There's
and like the Pomodoro timer in the top right and the like that kind of stuff.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's the UX like rework.
Yeah.
The visual stuff, and then the workflow kind of multiple levels of this. That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm interested, like, maybe this is the big question and like not worth how do I phrase this? Are there any other parts of this workflow and UI design that, let's say, we can find, separating out the UI level, we can find a workflow that brings these two together and takes the best from the today page and the best from the now, and like really combines them well into a workflow such that it's so obviously good that like those pages go away and now there's just one page.
Today and now go away. I mean, that's kind of what I was saying at the start though, is that like I actually think there is just deep value in having a mode where it doesn't even ask you, do you want to do this next thing next, where it just literally goes into empty space again. Like having that mode is a valuable mode to be in. Likewise, there's something really satisfying about just throwing in a list of 10 things and just not even questioning whether you're going to do the next thing next. It's like it comes up, you just start it.
Just go.
It like you take for granted that you're accepting the mission that's sort of being given to you.
So let's say that
like I just do think those are all beautiful modes.
I suppose
what I'm saying. So it's like there could maybe be a version where they're somehow all on one page, if that's what you're asking. And therefore, in that sense, people can use all those modes, but only on one page. And again, whatever sort of toggle switch you have to set whether it should ask you or assume or not even assume, like or whatever.
I'm definitely, I think I'm of that mind of like the difference between the two modes that I can see is that on one you have a list of items below, list of intentions, and you have like the current intention. And in the other mode, that list goes away, so there's no list anymore, and there's just the one intention, and when you complete it, it just pops into the next one.
So it's like if the way the next action tab works is it pops into the next one by default. The way the now page works is it goes into like open-ended mode by default.
I see.
Like those are the two differences. And what I was seeing as this hybrid one is that instead it says, here's your candidate next action, accept or pick something else.
Yeah.
And I love that because there's something about like, yes, this is what I'm going to work on. And actually choosing that is like really beautiful. Like having that moment of like choosing, yes, this is in fact what I'm going to work on next.
It goes from an intention to an action maybe.
Yeah.
Or like the now.
Yeah, and I don't know, an open question is whether that should combine with the, do you want to take a break right now?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I could see it going either way. Like in particular, like I'll highlight multiple things. So first of all, sometimes the thing you might want to do is say, like, so you've completed the thing. Now I don't know what the UI shows you, but just here are a few different things you could do.
Yeah.
You could say, okay, I've completed this thing. I'm going to go for a walk now. I don't know what I'm going to do next. A different thing you could say is, here's the thing I'm going to do next. I'm going to do it right now, in fact.
I'm just going to go.
A different thing you could say is, here's the thing I'm going to do next, but I'm going to go for a walk first. And that's just like a slightly different decision than, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I'm going to go for a walk, and probably by the time I'm done my walk, I'll know what I want to do next.
Yeah.
Right? And it's again a situation where I'm opinionated about some things, but I actually think both of those are good. Now this is getting pretty nitty gritty. It might not literally make sense to have UI elements for them.
Yeah.
But I'm saying like I don't think that one of them is inherently better. I just think that they are different different modes. And I guess another way to put it is like there was this thing I said when I had my marketing consult with Visa that he loved, which was Complice is more opinionated than I am.
Yeah.
So it's like Complice is opinionated software.
It is.
Very much.
It is.
And I personally think that like there are situations where you might want to use GTD. I also personally think that Complice has certain limitations that GTD or other systems, other apps don't have.
Yeah.
But there's a sense in which, from Complice's perspective, Complice would agree that there are certain things that you can't do that it would like you to be able to do if there was a good way to do them without violating Complice's principles, which there may be. We just haven't found it yet. But there's a sense in which Complice is sort of opinionated in certain ways that I wouldn't necessarily be. Like I could design another app that would sort of disagree with Complice's philosophy. And it would be possible for me to make that app in some sense, right? Difficult because the alignment between me and Complice does go very deep, but Complice is opinionated in ways that I'm not. And so there is actually an interesting question of should Complice be opinionated about which of these modes?
Right.
I don't think so. I think I just do think they all are compatible in the same way that Complice is open-ended about whether the Pomodoro timer runs continuously or whether you have to restart the timer every time it ends. Those are two modes, they're both great, I've used both of them, and they have something in common actually with this. It's does the thing automatically advance or do you have to manually do it? That's actually a good, one thing that I don't think has been studied nearly enough is just simply workflow design. People talk about apps, but an app is not a workflow.
Right.
An app facilitates one or more workflows. A workflow can be performed in any of various tools, right? You could make a paper tool for doing approximately the Complice workflow. It would have some limitations in terms of, you can't resort paper and also you definitely can't get to the end of the week and have all of your goal 1 stuff arranged like this, all of your goal 2 stuff arranged like that, because how do you rearrange all those tiny lines of paper, right? So there's limitations to certain tools, but the point is the basic concept of a workflow can be ported between different tools. And and I guess if you write with pen, then it's append only.
Yeah. You're right.
Right?
Yep,
you can strike it off, but you can't edit it.
Or reorder.
Yeah. Well, right, and in that case you can't reorder, which is different from Complice. But but that is an interesting thing. It's writing a Complice intention is like writing in pen, a colored pen in particular. Haven't actually thought about that. Should tweet that. Anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think UX, the field of UX has studied workflows quite a bit, and what's the right level of effort. It's not zero effort for workflows. Like there is certain levels of user buy-in that you want, and I haven't studied the literature on workflows.
Well, I mean, it feels to me like people study workflows in the context of a particular tool. I guess what I mean is like, I don't think enough study has gone into generalized workflows, right? Like Complice is not a tool for doing X, it's a tool for doing, like, it's not a tool for doing X where X is some specific thing, it's a tool for doing X where X is like whatever you want to do.
Right.
And so I guess I think I'm realizing like one parameter, if you were to make a study of workflows, and when Benjamin was working on Complice with me some years ago, he and I actually explored modeling different workflows, and we sort of started researching that. We got, I don't know, a couple dozen hours into just like studying that. But it seems like one parameter of workflows is this question of to what extent is something automatic versus like user versus like manually chosen or something like that. I guess another dimension of workflow could be described as like whether something is push versus pull with respect to the user. Do you have to check it or does it notify you?
Yep.
That's
I'm thinking of user journey diagrams, like for an e-commerce site. It was amazing how fast it ballooned out, where we wanted to put every single touch point that a customer could interact with us on a piece of paper with lines flowing through them and cycles, and where are these necessary, where are they optional, if they are optional, what are the implications downstream of those, and it gets complex pretty fast. But that was a massive deal, actually, mapping out these workflows, and you find out where things can be eliminated, where you need to add a little bit more, where it's not clear. So that could be a really fun exercise for Complice, just putting it all in a user journey context.
Well, and I'm thinking about like, another thing you can do with respect to Complice, for instance, is like you can ask, where do you have to leave Complice to continue a particular kind of workflow? Like imagine Complice didn't have a Pomodoro timer inside it. Then it's like if you want to have Pomodoros as part of your workflow, you've got to use a third-party tool. And you were asking today, I think for your own purposes, does Complice have a place to make notes on the thing that you're working on? And I was like, no. I mean, I have thought of that, but at the moment, no. And various users have asked for it, and I think there's something really beautiful there. And I've even explored sort of one way to do it, but they don't save anywhere, so it wouldn't have answered your particular thing. They will save somewhere, but anyway, not necessarily actually. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But like, so currently, like there's, one component of a workflow is, think out loud in writing about what you're doing. That's a really useful component of a workflow. And Complice doesn't really afford that at the moment. Like there's no place to just do that. We could add that in various ways. But currently, if you want to do it, you have to go use some other tool, a paper journal, a Roam, workflowy, Google Doc, text file, email to a friend. You got to think about it somewhere other than in Complice. And so that's an interesting thing where it's like, oh, okay, if that's a part of a workflow that we think is really valuable, then maybe we do want it within Complice, right? Now there's design decisions to make there. Is it plain text? Is it rich text?
You can go on and on.
What other Complice specific like magic can we do because it's inside Complice? Like,
right.
There's some interesting questions there. And I mean, part of it for Complice is just like, people take notes and then they want to find their notes later, and so given the Complice life cycle where stuff is drifting into the past when you don't do it, it's like if someone takes 2 pages of notes on the thing that they're doing, how are they going to access that? And that's basically where I'm like, this starts to feel a little bit a little bit risky in terms of just like, but it's not staleness, right? Like notes aren't stale. Like the stale thing is the part where you're making plans and then not doing them. Like taking notes on something isn't inherently stale. I guess part of why I haven't done it is that I thought like the place to do it would actually be somehow in Rome rather than in Complice, right?
That is, I mean, that's what I keep coming back to with like some Complice designs of like, where do I go to Complice and where do I stay in Rome?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
Yeah. And so like I've thought about like, okay, you know, what Complice workflows can you implement inside Rome at the moment? And you know, how hard would it be to make plugins that would sort of be like Complice in Rome, right? And Connor's been trying to pitch me on doing that, but like it's missing a few features that would be necessary to make it real. Like it's missing the part where you can't actually edit your list for the day. Like you can't remove stuff from the list. Like that is actually a core part of Complice. It changes what it is to intend something that you can't unintend it.
Interesting.
I mean, you can hit not today on it, but you can't make it not have been there. Like it means you can't be quite as sloppy with putting stuff on the list.
What do you put in there?
Right. And it also, I mean, even just having the Complice workflow in the context of Rome, where you can make gigantic lists of future stuff. Yeah. It's like, what does it even mean to have the Complice workflow inside a context where you can totally make all sorts of stale bullshit? I don't know. Right.
Yeah. I've got thoughts there.
Yeah.
But
anyway, that's maybe a different
besides the point. Yeah, so going back to these workflows and this idea of like Complice is opinionated, I am like, just with this redesign in general, I'm concerned at adding another screen, because that was a big confusion point for me and an overwhelm point of like, it looks like there are multiple places that look wildly different to do the same thing, which is I want to complete my intentions.
Was this like between today and now, for instance?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Like it just, and I remember seeing the now tab and feeling like the sense of, that's nice. Like there's only one thing. That's very much how I think. There's only one priority. It's the top priority. When that priority is done, there's only one priority, and it's the top priority.
Yeah.
And we continue until we die.
Yeah.
So,
and sometimes there's nothing to do. And I actually want to make the now page better at having a mode that's like, I am doing nothing in particular right now. Like it has a break button, but it's not good enough. I somehow want there to be like even more of like a, no, I am really utterly being with the unknown of everything. I mean, this is where, you know, like you can't totally separate the Dharma and productivity workflows.
Lovely.
Right? Like there's something to that. Like, you know, it's like you complete a task, okay, that's a cessation event.
Yep.
Now there's a new arising. If you can really feel that, like really feel it, like the cadence, the moment when it's like, that's done.
Oh, yeah. That physical sensation of your brain releasing something.
Yeah.
Is pleasant.
It's quite ecstatic. And
it is separate than finishing something. Yeah.
Right. Like, when you finish it, and then there's when you feel that you finished it. Like you've really let go of needing to do anything more with it.
Yeah.
And I remember having this really beautiful experience. This is related to the thing I want to somehow add to the now page, because it's part of the whole point of the page, which is something like, oh, this is also related to what I was saying to Nebras actually last night. Anyway, you'll see the connection, but which is like I once went for a walk after a long day, and I'd had a difficult conversation that I had recorded and I had sent to somebody else because it was an important thing for them to have as part of all the everything. And there was this feeling of like, okay, I had that conversation, I sent it off to that person, they're going to listen to it, and whatever's going to happen is going to happen, but they're asleep right now, nothing's happening with that right now, and I have done everything I need to do before sleeping. I'm done. Like, I am completely free for the day.
Nice.
Like, there's nothing else for me to do. And I felt that feeling deeper than maybe I ever had before. And I was just out walking, and all there was the next step. I was just walking, and there was nothing for me to do. And I actually teared up and like started crying a little bit because there was just this feeling of profound relief.
Yeah.
It was as if Sisyphus had finally got the boulder to the top, almost. Like it was just like this feeling of like, oh, there's nothing. I'm just walking. And like walking is sort of zero effort, like it's in this moment. Like I don't
maybe even effort positive.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah, negative effort. As I sometimes say, like it releases energy. But the walking was simply happening in the same way that like my breathing right now is just happening. Like I'm not doing it. And so it's like that's the feeling actually that I want to actually evoke for at least half a second every time you complete something on the now page. Like that's what the now page is for. That's actually not like the other workflows aren't intended to evoke that. They're actually intended to evoke a kind of chaining of like, okay, this is done and now this, sort of like a kind of momentum quality. But the now page is almost supposed to evoke, oh shit, I know the way to do that. Oh, that's kind of annoying though. I think I know how to do it. Okay, so I think I know how to do it even without the annoying part. So you complete something on the now page, and the page goes blank for like a second or two.
Yeah.
Just completely blank.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
And then like the UI fades in again.
Yeah.
And then I think the way to not make that annoying is that if you have a key press while it's blank, then the UI comes back. So it's like if you're like going through with hotkeys and you're just like putting in 3 new things, like suppose that you have the now page up and you do go for a walk, and while you're on a walk you incidentally pick up a thing and run into a friend, and so you actually come back with the walk with multiple things you want to like add as like here's extra things that I did or something like that. You want to be able to just throw those in and complete them and not be sort of disrupted in the flow of doing that. But it's more like in the absence of that, you hit complete on the thing and it's like
That's chaining, like chain mode, I have a hard time arguing that you shouldn't have that moment. And it can be a full screen thing. It can also be the animation design that we had discussed was the actual item. When you click complete, the intention just fades away and there's a pause. And then it asks you what you want to do next. Or it auto completes. Like that was part of the discussion. But even if you're chaining, like take a fucking breath. We'll be here for you.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have ever you know that feeling when you go to fucking log into your bank website and it takes like 3 seconds to log you in, and you go check Twitter while it's trying to log you in. We don't want that.
Yeah.
Right?
I hear that.
And like that's the thing that happens if you interrupt someone who doesn't want to be interrupted. But the thing about the now page is that the whole point is that you've done the thing and you're supposed to sort of release into nothing for a sec. Like that's the whole point. You're not doing the thing and then the next thing and then the next thing. You're doing the thing and then you're wondering what to do next. Like that is the whole point of the page. So it feels appropriate to me for the now page to have it like mostly sort of at least imply that for a second or two you're not going to use the UI. But again, I do think if you try, it shouldn't stop you. Like that is, if you having the UI stop you is annoying. Right?
Yeah.
But having it not prompt you is different.
Yeah, I think
you see
yeah, definitely. I think any mouse movement or key press, like add in the mouse movement as well. If you click and then it starts to fade and you move your mouse and it just comes back.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. You could have it be some minimum amount of mouse movement. You could also have it be like, because you could click and then move a little bit, but it should act. So it should be both a delay. Like it has to be a mouse movement after 50 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds, and maybe at least 3 pixels or something.
At least.
So that
But
all slightly harder to code, but worth it for the effect the effect is so like
Lovely.
yeah. I want people to have that feeling. I want me to have that feeling.
Yeah.
Selfishly, I want the now page to do that fade for me, like a really slow fade, like a whole so like 1 or 2 seconds of nothing, and then a whole second of the UI fading back in.
Nice. Yeah, you
Like-
should definitely talk to Nebras about how to make that like maximally satisfying. Because there's this idea where animations, like her brain was really going to transitions and animations
Okay,
for
cool.
some stuff of like how to make this maximally understandable and satisfying.
Yeah, because the Complice UI currently has almost no animations in it. It's basically got 2. Like if you assign a Pomodoro without using the drag and drop, it like animates the tomato moving down.
Yeah.
And then the other is if you complete something with the big done button, you get this like giant check mark that flies at you and like fades out as it
I
flies.
remember that. That was fun.
And I actually built that like back in 2014, and then it broke after a couple of years, and it just took me years to get around to fixing the animation.
That's
But I fixed it again a year or 2 ago.
But yeah, that feels really nice. I will make my vendetta explicitly. I think that you should only have one page for interacting with intentions in Complice. And like there are ways to do that, but like having separate pages was a pretty big confusing moment.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
There's a few ways to kind of solve that.
Yeah.
I think. I agree with the thing you're going for on one level, but part of the magic of Complice is the fact that this is not true in a certain sense. You can set your intentions, a whole bunch of them at once, on the today page, and then hop over to the now page and not have to deal with your list for the rest of the day in sort of full list mode. And so the fact that there's 2 different ways of interfacing with this is actually really awesome. So there's sort of a few critiques here. Like one is like, should you have multiple workflows? And I'm arguing yes, absolutely.
Yes, you should definitely have multiple workflows.
And then the question is like, should those workflows have their own pages? I'm not opinionated about that. Like, mostly. But I actually do think there's something profound to the fact that there's like you literally like conceptually the fact that you have to load a completely different page in order to get your intentions list, as opposed to just hitting a tab that loads instantly.
Yeah.
I think actually matters. Like I think there is actually something like a page is a context, and the now page is a context where you don't have your list. And it's harder to create that context if the list is not just a click away, because it is a click away in the UI. You just hit the word today at the top.
Right.
But that click loads a new page, which is a new context. And it's like, okay, sure, we could make it one URL with just an animation to transition between the 2. It's not that much different. But personally, I still think the fact that they're 2 different pages is kind of better. Like, and one of the things that enables too is you can go straight to it with your URL. You type, I don't know who does this, maybe it's just me, but like you type complice.co/username// now, or bookmarks, right? Sure, or you just type in now page and hit the down arrow and hit enter or whatever. So like the fact that you can go straight to it with its own URL is part of what makes it a context as well. Like you can arrive there skipping your list. You've got your list, and if you hit your today page, it's going to show you your list. But fuck that. You just got back from a shower. You had a shower thought, and you were going to act on that shower thought. You don't want to even fucking see that list.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like that's where having its own page is actually really important to what the now page even is.
Yeah, I definitely feel that.
Like there's a reason why the today page has like as tabs next action and organize, because you're supposed to go back and forth between those regularly. That's part of the whole point of that is the interplay, the dance between those. Okay, so there's my counter to your vendetta.
Okay. So
I didn't hear your whole vendetta.
No, that's fine. That's fine. This is valuable. I was poking to understand what the page desire was, and that the poke succeeded. So I appreciate
you got your response.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The having it on a separate page and having the load seems not like you can do it via an animation or something. Like I think that one I'm not as compelled by. The URL makes total sense to me. And
I mean, you can hot swap those,
yeah.
but at what point does it become not a different page versus a different page, right?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me is having the core thing that you're looking at feel really consistent. Like I'm doing a different workflow, but ultimately, like it's kind of like the design language where we're gonna have like the same way of showing intentions everywhere. We're gonna have the same way of like you're working on this thing. Here's the thing you're working on, and like maybe there's stuff below, like there's a to do, there's an intention list down there. Maybe there's a search bar for like past intentions. Maybe there's nothing when you're really focusing, but like having it feel like a cohesive whole and like the same thing, and rather than like having right now the list looks very different than the now page, and it's not clear that these are the same thing when you're looking at them.
Do you mean just that like the visual style of the intentions?
Yes.
So I mean, some of that. Well, I don't know. While we're recording this video, I don't necessarily want to demo a thing to you that people can't see. But like, long story short, you know, one of the main differences, visually speaking, is that when something's in sort of now page-ish mode, it has a color tinted background in the current visual design, right?
Yeah.
And
that sounds like a fun thing for the new design too. For what's worth. Yeah.
Well, and when something's in the list, it doesn't. It's just colored text. Different colors depending on the goal. And actually, on mobile, it does actually have a color tinted background, which I'm not totally satisfied with the fact that they're different. But the reason it does is because it wants to exist as like a thing you can sort of touch in a slightly different way. Like it's sort of,
that makes whole sense.
There's like a feeling of like like, you know, it should have.
It's interactable.
Yeah, like now technically, I think if you just click on an intention, it does hit complete on it, like on the thing. But like in terms of like being able to long press it, technically on mobile you can swipe to the side to complete something. That's not advertising. There's maybe a tip about it, but it's not like intuitive. It's not super intuitive, and there's no animation for it. Unfortunately, I just haven't taken the time to code that. It's sort of just like, because that's pretty complicated, right? Like, you know, the difference between receive this gesture and do a thing versus when you drag sideways, the thing slides. Is like those are just two totally different scales of complexity. But that's a dev time thing. Like obviously that would be better. But that's part of why on mobile it has this different visual style.
Yeah.
We could just have that visual style everywhere, where intentions just have this like faded color background. That's even more color. You know, for people who find the color overwhelming in Complice, like I don't think it's optimal. I think there is something valuable about the fact that it also is it's more color and it's worse contrast.
Yeah, and there are ways to solve the mobile without doing the color background, right?
Yeah. You can have lines between the things, like just little tinted lines.
Yeah, do a white background on everything, and then it looks interactable. And, yeah,
or something. But anyway, but like. And then, you know, like another option is instead of having the colored background on the next action tab, you could have, or on the now page, you could have like the intention is still on like a white background on top of whatever other color stuff is going on. Like you could do that, right? But aside from that, I mean, they actually are pretty much the same visual style. It's like it's the main color of the goal, and it's, you know, Open Sans font. The size changes, but that's appropriate to what. You know, the shift between lists versus like one next action. So I don't know. That's like,
it's interesting. It I'm trying to articulate exactly what feels important about having it be one page and one view. Like I'm doing my day, and I go to Complice to focus, and I go to Complice, and then I decide like, okay, now it's time to organize my to-dos and or my intentions, and not able to articulate it as well as I want. I guess they feel so similar in how you're functionally doing it that I have a hard time like separating them and having the visual
So to be clear, like so there's visual design stuff, and then there's stuff about the nature of pages and sort of the choices that are implied in that. Because basically, like, there used to be only one main workflow page for Complice. Like, if you wanted to use Complice any way other than just like either by email or like only entering your outcomes on the timeline, which are two pretty weird ways to use Complice. There are people who basically just do outcomes, and in the very beginning it was only email based, although that's not how people use it anymore. The email receiving system was straight up broken for 2 months and nobody complained at one point. And I was like, well, clearly I am the only person submitting data by email anymore, like just because it's slightly more efficient under certain circumstances. But most people probably don't even know you can, and that's fine. But again, leaving aside those edge cases, it used to be the Today page was where you went to interact with Complice most of the time. Right? Unless you're doing reviews or you're changing your goals or you're looking through your timeline or whatever else, you're on the Today page. And the shift to having a Now page is pretty new. Like, that was just last summer that I added that. So Complice itself is actually encountering for the first time this question of like, how do we relate to different main pages? Like, you can now use Complice pretty fully and never touch the Today page. I don't know if anybody does. I'm actually not sure about that. I could check, right? Like, are there people who use the Now page every day and never use the Today page? My guess is there's one or two who approximately use it like that, at least, if not, a substantial chunk. But so Complice itself, is relatively new in terms of like 1 year out of 9 years of its existence. Relatively new to the question of what does it mean to have multiple main workflow pages. And so there's like, I partially feel in the context of that, just like excited at the idea of your thing becoming a third. But then the puzzle is, how do you orient users to which of those they might want to use? That's actually kind of the puzzle. And when you think about it, like Twitter has multiple main pages. There's the feed. There's your notifications.
But those are separate things, right? Notifications are, an event happened. The feed is here are your tweets. And like, Complice has different pages for...
I think they're not as different as you think. Like, if you want to check Twitter, you can go to your timeline and check your timeline and see what your timeline has, and you'll get some tweets to interact with. If you want to check Twitter, you can go to your notifications and see who has interacted with you and see what tweets are being brought to your attention via that. And these are two totally different meanings of check Twitter. Thirdly, you can go to your own profile and just like, this is kind of like a notifications tab. It's like, go to your own profile, scroll down, and see who's interacted with your tweets. That's basically a way of checking some of your notifications without actually clearing them, which is something I do often. But yeah, like,
I'll double down that they're different things. Like, notifications are something happened, like, to me or around me. You got a new email, for instance, and like I've now, like, I should go check this out. The timeline is what's happening. I want to consume content and like understand what my friends are doing so that I can maybe reply and do all that. And like, I think they're fundamentally different things, which is why the UI looks different and like pages.
So I see what you mean, and I think they may feel more like that to some people. But personally, like, I have so I don't use the notifications tab at all. I have a custom search that functions as my notifications.
I remember reading about that.
And so, and moreover, I have a custom user style that makes the like unread count on the notifications go away. So I never know how many notifications I have, and when I do check it on my phone, it's usually 19 plus, which is to say it's usually maxed out. Which is to say, for me, notifications don't contain any like, you got a thing, go check it. I almost got a thing. I'm gonna check it when I feel like it. So there's no like, it isn't actually pulling me in. I don't have importantly, I mean the notifications page. I don't mean push notifications. I mean the notifications page, which is really more of an inbox. It's an inbox that has no mark on red, thank God, or it would become a to-do list. And so the thing I'm trying to point at is if you want, like, you're like, Twitter, give me content. Is like, you know, as a user stories, right? As a user, I want Twitter to stimulate me.
Yeah. You go to the timeline.
Or you go to the notifications tab. You can actually just go to either of those places to get stimulated. Right? And they're different workflows. They're different meanings of like what you're getting.
Yeah. This may be getting more like philosophical than I'm willing to go up to.
Yeah, anyway,
like,
so
we use different nouns for them. One is a notification, one is a tweet, so therefore they like show up differently. And the idea of like what are the nouns in the systems, and each noun, like this is the basis of a design language. Or, like we're gonna show
right, but
attention
half of your notifications are tweets though.
Yeah,
right.
It's a different like it's someone came into your context, and it may be
or they
context
tagged you
wrote on yours
or whatever. But like if you check the timeline, sometimes, you know, unless you're using latest tweets mode, if you check the timeline, sometimes what you get is something that somebody interacted with you, and instead of showing that to you in a notification, they show it to you in the timeline. Like,
for sure.
So anyway,
we can go on to another.
the point that I'm trying to get at here is, what is the point? I guess I thought that when I said this, you'd go, oh, and instead you're pushing back. So I'm sort of like, well, whatever my point was, this is not going to be the way to make it, I guess. But is there another example?
Yeah, I'm interested.
That would kind of capture the same thing. So what we're talking about here is like multiple views on the same content, or in some sense the same content, right? Like, and like, what's the value of that?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Complice already has multiple views on the same content. The timeline is a view of intentions and outcomes. The reviews are a view of intentions and outcomes.
Yeah.
And so part of the magic of Complice is actually the fact that you have completely different views that interface with the same data.
Yeah.
And so you can interplay these workflows really powerfully. You know, you can go and do your weekly review, and it's got all the shit that you did.
Yeah.
Right? Like, other apps don't have that, right? You go to do your weekly review, and it's, all right, I guess for my GTD weekly review, I will now scroll through my inbox the way I usually do, except, like, different, you know? But it's not like, you're not looking at your week. You're just looking at all your shit. And so the fact that Complice is able to reflow, it's like Complice has a notion of, here's a list of things I intend to do today. There's a page that shows you that list in the context of being a checkbox. There's also a page, which is to say the timeline, which shows you that list as just one of many days. You know, here's the list of stuff I intended to do today. Here's the list of stuff I intended to do yesterday. Like, it's just that, and that's, you know, no, I don't think people go to the timeline to look at their today's intentions, but they're there, right? Like, and then also Complice has a page called the Now page, which sort of just incidentally is like, you know, oh, you're trying to decide what to do? Well, here's a list of stuff that this morning or last night you intended to do. Like, you could draw from that if you want. And so, like, the fact that, like, your list is able to be used by the Now page while also being kind of ignored is really cool.
Yeah, and the, like, you know, maybe this is a good chance to, like, dial into, like, what I'm saying, what I'm not saying, because I'm learning, like, how to phrase this or how to think about it as we go.
Yeah. And I like having a foil here to like lay out why I think this is cool.
Yeah, no, it's good. This felt like an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
It's delivered.
And I feel really, really glad that we're recording it like that. It just like feels really good.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
When you're going to the timeline, you're doing like a fundamentally different activity where I'm reviewing. When I go to the projects page or the goals page, excuse me. Yeah.
That's also a very different activity. It's like
it's a very
thinking big
different
picture
activity.
about like my goals. Yeah.
Yeah, and then when I go to the Now page and Today page, they feel like the same activity.
I agree. Yeah. No. So I'm with you on that. They are what are they for? They are for a core workflow of execution.
Yeah.
Which is different than the timeline or the goals page or whatever. Yeah. So there's a sense in which, like, hierarchically, Complice has, it's sort of like, if you ask, what are you doing on Complice right now? There's sort of like three-ish things. Well, it's subtle, but like, so like, if you're on your timeline or you're on the search page, the question of like, what are you doing is like, I don't know, I'm like managing some stuff. I'm trying to remember like what day it was that I called Bob so that I can mention that in an email, right? Like I'm looking right? It's just some random shit like that. The timeline page is in some ways just sort of a functional, it needs to exist, but it's not for anything in particular.
Yeah, right.
Then you've got something like goal setting or big picture planning type stuff, which is in some ways the goals page. Then you've got something like a review mode. Now the review mode, interestingly, actually is all the reviews pages. It's also sort of the outcomes phase of the today page. And that's a little weird, but it's also sort of necessary because you don't want to have to leave the context of your daily cycle in order to go review your day, right? So when you're reviewing just your day, it makes sense that happens on your day page, like the page that is today. Now, I think it wouldn't be totally crazy to actually build into the now page the ability to do a weekly review.
Okay, so we've got the now page, which is don't show me any distractions.
Yeah, but it could show you one thing, which is your weekly review for this particular goal. And that's just what you're doing right now. In the same way that it can show you your outcomes and let you submit them. So there's something kind of neat, something kind of neat there, right? It's like bringing in other aspects of the Complice, or it's like, let me reset this goal, like change this goal, and I'm actually doing that right there embedded in the page. Anyway, a bit complicated to pull in all the different modules, but leaving aside the tech of that. So where am I going with this? Right, so there's these few modes in Complice, and then the last one, just sort of having gotten those out of the way, the last one is something like, I'm actually doing stuff not in Complice. I am doing my actual work, which is not managing my Complice stuff. It's my actual work. And there's 3 pages for that, actually. The today page, rooms, and the now page. And the rooms currently take for granted that the thing at the top is going to be the today page. But that's actually bad. Like, they should have a mode where you're using the room, but at the top is more now page. Like, obviously. And in fact, that would be more intuitive in some ways for new users who used to be a guest in the room where all they had was basically done and not now. Like, that would actually be more intuitive for those users, come to think of it. So the room is not quite its own, it is its own context, very much so, but it's not its own workflow. Right? Like, it's a context that embeds a workflow. And so from that perspective, I can remake your argument back to you that maybe there should be a workflow page and then a context page and then a workflow within that or something, right? Like, basically that, like, the room is a context, and then within that you should be able to have either the today thing or the now thing, and you should be able to switch between those without losing the state of the room, which
that would be nice.
The current concept of now and today as pages doesn't afford. So that's interesting. Like, I've come back around slightly to your argument, which is that, like, there should be more fluidity between today and now. The today and now page use some of the same code on the back end to render them. You might be able to guess. Like,
that makes sense. Let me step away to the bathroom real quick. And then this is interesting.
I'll just hit pause on this. Wow, we've hit an hour. Let me just end it and save it.
That's on.